Hi guys. I had quite a few of you on the exit ticket and classroom tell me that you would really appreciate some book recommendations. So I'm going to kind of just whip through these slides and give you some new titles that might hopefully interest you. So I would recommend that you have something to write with so that you can jot down a couple titles as they come. So some of the best books that I have seen in the library are, one of them is All American Boys. This is about two friends. They're teenage boys. One's black, one's white. It involves an encounter with the police, and it goes back and forth between the two narrators. It's a phenomenal book. I read it really, really fast. It's great, particularly for the guys. It's kind of more geared towards the guys, but girls will love it too. One of Us is Lying. If you have not read this yet, I cannot recommend it enough. This is the one where the kids are at a Saturday detention school and one of them dies, and then you have to figure out what happened. It's just phenomenal. The Hate U Give, I know it was a movie, but the book is always better. So if you have not read that, I would recommend that you do. Jodi Picoult's Leaving Time. This is a little bit of a older, this isn't a YA book. This is an adult book. It is my personal favorite book of all time. It involves like an elephant like refuge place. And then there's a mom and a daughter and a psychic, and it is the alternating narrators type of book. Huge twist at the end. So good. Ashfall. I have talked about this and I will continue to push this book until you guys read it. Everybody should read this book. This is the book about the kid in Iowa, and then the volcano erupts out west, and then suddenly the entire earth is covered in a layer of ash, and his family's in Chicago, and now in this like post-apocalyptic world, he's got to figure out how to get to his parents in Chicago. So it's an adventure, dystopia, just a phenomenal book. Quarantine, ironically, this is one of my favorite books. It's very apropos. But it's actually not quarantine as we know it today, but it is about a group of high schoolers where all of the people over the age of 18 die, and they're stuck in the school and they have to figure out how to survive. So it's like high school on steroids plus the nightmare of like some dystopian world. Butter, I think I've talked about it. It sounds terrible, but it's really actually a very funny book. It's about an overweight kid who he gets made fun of a lot, and he decides that he's going to live stream himself eating until he dies. It's a very morbid thought, but it has a phenomenal story of morality and kindness kind of woven throughout. And the narrator, like I said, is just hilarious. The Selection series, especially obviously for the girls out there, this is just like such a fun, quick read. And I know a lot of you are reading it right now, so I would encourage you to tell your friends to read it too. This is that story of a girl who, it's kind of like The Bachelor meets the Hunger Games. So it's a future world slash kind of, it's a love story, but it's not really a love story. It's more, it's just a really good read. Noggin is very interesting. This is where the kid has brain cancer, so he has to have a full body transplant. And so he is on the body of somebody else. And it's just a very strange, but really interesting story. Salt to the Sea. This is the story of the Wilhelm Gustloff, which was a carrier ship during World War II. And it was sunk by a torpedo, and way more people died in this. This is based on a true event than died in the Titanic, but you just don't hear about it. It's just one of those weird kind of tragedies that have gone under the radar. This is another really great story where there are alternating narrators and they're all different passengers on the ship. The Book Thief, this is another one that I've talked a lot about, but I cannot tell you how beautiful this book is. This is set during World War II, and the narrator is Death as he's looking down on this city, and one of the little girls in the city is the main character. So these are some of like my all-time favorite books. The Burn Journals I've talked about. This is the true story of a kid who sets himself on fire and survives. This is a memoir. We are encouraging you to read fiction this go around, but it does read in the sort of fashion that you would be able to read that for this unit. Same with I Am Malala. If you have not read that, it's just phenomenal. I'll Give You the Sun is another really great book. It's very beautifully written. It's very fast to read. And it's just a story of two people, again, going back and forth. Never Fall Down is about the Cambodian killing fields. I've talked about this one before too. It is where a kid, he's a soldier and he's got to just keep staying upright, right? If he falls down, they kill him. And it's just a terrible tragedy that you might not have learned about in history. All right, so these are some based on what your like genre favorite is. If you like aliens, the book I Am Number 4 is a good choice. If you're into like supernatural, the book Fallen is another really good one. If you like magic, there are two books that get checked out of the library a lot. I have not read them, but I've heard great things. One is called Immortal Beloved, and the other one is called Sweep. If you like sci-fi or time travel, anything by Haddix is great. We have a lot of her books in the library. And for dystopian, here are a few other lists that you could look at. But if you are into like sci-fi, dystopia, write down the name Haddix to look into the library. These are Mrs. Webster's picks. So you can see some of them I've talked about: Quarantine, Ashfall, 13 Reasons Why is, it's definitely a difficult read. I don't know if you've seen the Netflix series or not, but it's the same thing. Intensity, Mrs. Webster has copies of this in her classroom. She can do a book talk with you if you're interested. Gym Candy, I know a lot of you have read it, but it's about a kid who starts taking steroids to do better at sports, at football. Skeleton Creek, I have not read, but I know that with this particular story, there are like links that you follow and you can like play along online. A Child Called It is a memoir. It is the saddest book I've ever read in my life. I'm sure a lot of you have read it. It's about a child going through an abusive home. Ellen Hopkins writes books called, this one is called Crank. They have mature themes in them, so definitely if you're uncomfortable with that, stay away from her books. They read like poetry, but they're all narratives, they're all fiction, and they're really, really great fast reads. Jodi Picoult, we have a lot of her books in the library. She's my favorite author. This book is called 19 Minutes, and it's all about a school shooting and the 19 minutes about it. And it takes you through the point of view of a student, of a parent, of one of the police. I think a lawyer has a section in it too. It's a very, very powerful read. Every Day, you may have read this or heard of this. This is where the narrator, who is an unnamed person that goes by A, kind of wakes up in a different body every day. And so each chapter is a different day in the life of whoever he is living through for that day. Salt to the Sea, I just talked to you about. Highly recommend this book. Okay, so these are Mrs. Cooper's favorites. She's your ALP teacher. The One and Only Ivan, I know I've talked about it because that's actually the book I'm reading today, and it is so good but so sad. It's about the elephant and monkey that are kept in like a shopping mall, basically. My Friend Dahmer is a graphic novel based on a friend that grew up with Jeffrey Dahmer, the notorious serial killer. You can read these sorts of books, but for when you are writing your digital book journal responses, I really want you to be reading a chapter fiction book. As far as that goes, To Kill a Mockingbird, if you have not read this book, this is like one of those classic books that every student should read. Tell the Wolves I'm Home is another really powerful story. These are a little bit more of a challenge to read, but so worth it. East of Eden is my all-time favorite book, besides the other one that I mentioned. I have a lot of favorite books. But this is the one, it's John Steinbeck, so he's a very famous writer. And this follows the story of Cain and Abel from the Bible, but it's told through the point of view of farming brothers in more modern California during the Dust Bowl. If you haven't read any John Green either, I would recommend that you definitely pick up some John Green books. Miss Shelley was our librarian last year, and these are some of her favorites. I've spoken to some of them. I will add that We Were Liars is probably one of the student favorites of all time. It tells the story of a girl and her cousins and some friends that they're like super rich kids, and they summer on an island, and they're super fancy, and then this thing happens, and that's all I can tell you. It starts off very kind of like slow, and you gotta puzzle your way through what's happening. And usually about 50 pages in, kids will come and talk to me like, I need some clarification on what's going on. And then you'll understand what's happening. You'll read it. And then on the last 50 page, biggest twist in any book that I've ever read. If you want to read a book that will just like shock you to your core, We Were Liars is it. It's not a super long book either. It's one that you can work through pretty quickly. Also, Out of My Mind is always a really great one to read. Miss Hoffman, who is back this year, these are some of her favorite books. I have read some of them, but as you can see, there's some that keep popping up on all of our lists. So East of Eden is a great challenge book if you wanted to push yourself. Selection Series is always super popular. The Hate U Give, and then again, there's our John Green. Trying to think if there's any more on here. Kwame Alexander is a phenomenal writer. He writes, these are very accessible books if you're someone that doesn't really love reading. It looks like poetry, but it's not poetry. It's just really lovely prose the way that he writes. Most of them have to do with sports, so it's a nice way to read a sports book that is also an award winner, and it's a fairly quick read as well. The Cellar is a super creepy book. We have this. This is where a guy kidnaps these girls and names them after flowers and like keeps them in the cellar. I haven't read it because it sounds just even dark for me. Let me see what else here. Silo is another really popular one. Divided We Fall is another really popular one too. This is like a future military story, so it combines dystopian with military. Let me see what else here. Ashfall, so good. Yeah, so hopefully these give you some good recommendations and good places to start. If none of these are still doing it for you, just come and talk to me and I'll make sure I get a book in your hands. But super important that you get a really good, exciting book for you over the next few weeks.